Okay, so today we're going to continue in the world of AutoCAD, and as I said last class, we're going to start working on folding out building elevations. And one of the kind of interesting things relating to drawing in AutoCAD is that we can take it as if we were drafting on a drafting table, or we can take it far more sophisticated and do stuff in 3D and or bring stuff in from Rhino and whatever. So there's really a broad spectrum of how you can go about using a program like AutoCAD. And in the old days, it was very much a substitute for a T-square and a drafting board and like the things that are over in 116, where we would actually draw out and lay things out by hand. And so I'm going to pursue drawing right now as if I were drawing by hand. So I'll use some of the mechanics that you probably have learned in 130 about relationships between a floor plan, or let's call it a top view, a front view, and a right side view. I'll use the same kind of principles to work through this. There are some cheater methods that I'll show you that if you're having trouble visualizing it, I can help you kind of get through it. But essentially what we're going to try to do is we're going to try to draw the elevations of this floor plan, basically in the space that is down here for the south elevation, and then we'll move on to the other elevations and work our way around the plan. And I'll show you how those kind of work as a strategy as we go forward. Just in the interest of letting you guys visualize what it is that I'm going to be drawing, I did do a quick 3D Rhino model of this particular building just so that you could see it. We're going to ultimately be modeling in SketchUp. For me, modeling in Rhino is much more comfortable, so doing this model in Rhino is a lot faster. But I will obviously do it in SketchUp as well. But I thought it would be useful for you guys to see essentially what this floor plan would ultimately become, and also kind of how it intersects the terrain. So there is a little bit of slope that's been established here, and you can kind of see it around the base of the building. And I want to be able to accommodate that slope in my elevation drawings. And I'll talk about how do we come up with what that is. Essentially, the front view, right, if we're looking at it like this, let me go ahead and change this mode here. This is the south elevation, which is what we're going to start with. Obviously, it's easier to see it as a 3D model than to see it in plan and have to fold it out in your head. But I thought it would be useful for you guys to see it that way before I started drawing it, so at least you knew kind of what I was going for. Okay, so when I start up with this, the first thing that I need some kind of a layer for the south elevation to go on, because obviously I'm drawing that elevation view. And I also would like some layer that ultimately isn't going to be printed that I can use to put some guides and to pull some reference points, etc., so that I don't have to worry about that showing up on the final drawing. So I'm going to go ahead and go into my layer properties, as we've done before, and I'm going to create a couple layers. The first layer I'm going to call south elevation. And the next layer I'm going to call guides, for lack of a better term. Now the guides layer I'm going to change to be a specific color. In this case we'll pick red. And I'm also going to change the guides so that they are a non-printing layer. So, whoops, that would be, I clicked the wrong one, sorry. Guides down here, there we go, non-printing, and we'll change that one to be red. And I'll go ahead and say OK. So I have a guides layer that is red, and it's not a printing layer. And I'll make that the current layer. And I also have a layer called south elevation, which is here, that is white, and it's currently the default line weight with the ability to print it. OK, so I'll go ahead and close my layers. And now I have guides active. And so what I want to do is I want to be able to pull down some lines that represent where my building's going to go. And so if you're a little bit lost in the beginning, bear with me while we get a little further, and then I think it'll start to make a little bit more sense. So I could come up and draw a line that started at this corner of the building and just goes straight down in that direction. There's nothing wrong with that. And then ultimately I could pull another line from this corner straight down, etc. AutoCAD has something, actually has two things, that are available to help us lay out kind of general guides. One is called array, and the other is called a construction line, which is essentially the same thing as array, it's just double-sided. So what array does, and I'm going to type RAY to start the array command, is it's a line that starts at one point and goes off to infinity in one direction. And so if I were to scroll out, you see that that line just keeps going off. Okay? So a ray is really good as a construction line. So I'm going to continue and do another set of rays, and I'll do one from each corner of the building on the south elevation. Like that. Okay, so I've pulled down those particular buildings, and now I'm going to draw a line that goes across them. And I can choose wherever, it's a completely arbitrary point, but it's going to give me a base to start my drawing. And so I could use a ray, or I could just use a regular line. And in this case, I'll just use a regular line to go across. Okay? So this gives me a reference point. And what I'll do with this reference point is I'll say that that is the finished interior floor, right, as a place to start from. So I have some heights established in this building. This region here is going to be at 12 feet in overall height. This region in the center is going to be at 10 feet, and this region on the right is going to be at 16 feet. That was something that I came up with in my head as part of this design. You'll decide what yours is based on your own design. Okay, so there's no right or wrong answer for what you're doing. So I'm going to go ahead and go to my line. And I'm actually going to switch off the guides layer here for a second and move to the south elevation layer. If I can find it. There it is. And now I'll go ahead and start with a line. And I'll start right at this corner. And I'm going to go up. This first section was 12 feet tall. So I'll go up 12 feet. And I'll hit enter. Then I'm going to come across to right there. And then I'll come back down. And I'll hit enter. Now I'll come over to this section, which I said was 16 feet, and I'll start right here. I'll go up 16 feet, I'll go over, and then I'll go down, and I'll finish. So if I were to turn off the guides layer, right, you can see that I'm starting to lay out where my building, or what my building looks like in elevation. I also said that my line across here was going to be at 10 feet. So we'll try to go up here 10 feet. And then we'll draw across, and that then establishes the roof line here in the middle section. Now I drew a building, if we switch over to the 3D view, I drew a building with flat roofs, right? You may have a pitched roof, in which case the roof is a little bit different. I can draw this with the pitched roof a little bit later as an example so that you can see what it would look like with a pitched roof. So let me come back. The other thing that I do need is I need a line that kind of represents where this, well, actually, I don't need that quite yet. We'll leave it like that as a guide. Okay, so I have these established. Now, there's thickness to the roof, for example. So maybe, let me look at this end here. I have a little bit of a recess with there, and then I have a little bit of a thickness associated with the roof. So what I need is I need an offset for the roof. And so we'll do offset. And again, I could have picked the offset tool. We'll specify 12 inches right there. And then each of these walls is 6 inches thick. So I have two ways of doing this. I could offset this side, or I could do another guideline that is a ray. So let me go back to guides. And I could say ray from there down, and from there down. And I could use those to then draw this part of my well. Oops, I have to switch layers here, sorry. Go back to my south elevation. And I could draw that part. Now, I had this envisioned as kind of a concrete monolithic pour, so I'm going to eliminate these little cross pieces. So let me trim. I'll trim these objects there and there. Okay, so I have that little piece drawn. I want to do the same thing with this wall, except this wall comes all the way up to the roof except for these little windows that are on the wall. So if these windows were above a kind of a kitchen counter, we know that the kitchen counter is 3 feet off the ground, so 36 inches. So these ones probably start at maybe 42 inches. And again, they probably stop at about a foot down from the ceiling or so. So let me go ahead and offset this. And maybe I'll carry them all the way to the ceiling. We'll go 12 inches for the structure. Same thing there. Now, I'm going to go back to my guides layer, and we'll use that ray command again. And I'm going to identify where all of these windows occur. So I'm right-clicking to repeat the last command, and I'm just drawing rays So array, I click where I want to start, and then I click in the direction that I want to go. Okay, so I have where all of those windows belong. We know where the tops of the windows are going to be right there, but I don't know where the bottoms are just yet because I need to create the bottom. So I said it would be maybe 42 inches up from the bottom. And so let me just go ahead and draw. Let me switch my layer here to be on the south elevation. Somehow south elevation doesn't jump out to me here. And go up 42 inches, and we'll just draw across. So I'm using that just kind of as a general guide, and then I can come back with the rectangle tool here, and I can draw each of these windows. All right, so let me go ahead and delete this, and let me delete this. And so now we can see, it looks like I deleted one of my guides, that I've drawn in those windows that would be there. Now these windows probably have a little bit more information. They probably have a little frame around them. So I might do an offset of maybe an inch. So let's say 1 inch. And we'll offset this, that. So they look a little bit more like they belong, right, as windows. And so I have that piece drawn. Now I need to also draw, there's windows on this wall, so I'll do the same process for this. So let me go back to my south elevation layer. And let me do array. And I've got these little columns that go between the windows. So we'll draw arrays where those columns go. There. Perfect. And so now I can go ahead and switch back to my south elevation. And I can again draw in where these columns would be. I'm going to go ahead and just take this line and copy it across the top. So I don't have to, it's going to take me a few less clicks to do it this way. There. So if I were to look at this without the guides, sometimes it's easier to see it without the guides. Let me temporarily turn those off. You can see that I'm starting to establish, okay, there's one piece of my building. I haven't drawn anything here. And this end, okay, I have the windows, but I need to divide those up into some panes of glass so they look a little bit more realistic. So let me turn back on those guides again. And let's say that the bottom section here, I don't know, we'll go up maybe 2 feet. Across. Now, since this is going to be the same across all the windows, instead of drawing in each of these, I'm actually just going to draw in the first one, and then I'll copy all the way across. So, and then let's say I'll make another little division down a little bit. We'll go down maybe 2 feet there. Let's make a little bit. Let's see. We've got that. We've got that. Let me go ahead and offset, and we'll say ½ inch maybe. There. 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 Let me also offset at 1 inch. There. And there. And basically, I'm creating that little frame around the windows. Let me go ahead and trim. I just did Control Z because I accidentally hit the wrong line. Those are gone. Let's do this. I probably should have turned that topography line off just so that it wouldn't interfere. And I need to get rid of that. Delete, delete, and delete. I do need one more little offset at the top and the bottom. So I can go back and do an offset again. 1 inch there. And I don't really have a line to do at the bottom, so I'll have to just draw up a line 1 inch over. And we'll do a trim again. And I just typed all after I typed trim so that it didn't actually have to select anything. Come up here. There. Delete. Delete. Okay. So I've drawn in what those windows look like, and maybe I need one more division in the center because this is an awfully big window, but we'll go with it for right now. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to select from the left to the right to select all of my interior, and then we'll copy this again. So I'm going to type copy, or I could click the copy button here, and I'll go across and copy it there, there, and there. I'll hit enter to finish. And so now I have those windows going all the way across, and if we were to look without the guides, right, you can see that let me turn off the topography so you're not seeing that at the same time. So you can see that I've started to put that piece of the facade together. Okay? Likewise, I've done this piece. Now I have one last piece here. So let me turn on the guides again. And I will again use array to identify this. So we'll say array. Oops, sorry, I need to be on the guides layer first. Now I'll do array from there, and there. That gives me the center. Windows, we'll say, are down in the offset 1 foot. There. And these are bathroom windows, so we'll go up same so that they'd be above the cabinet. Just going to draw a line across there. And I will once again do a little rectangle. It goes from here. There. Oops. I have to switch into my south elevation. We'll do a rectangle from there to there. And a rectangle from here to here. We get rid of that line and that line. And so now I have those two windows. Again, I'll do an offset of maybe 1 inch. There and there. Now I had originally drawn these as sliding windows, and I could divide those panes again with a little piece. So I could go here, and then let's offset to this side and to that side, delete the center, and since these are sliding, this would go up that, and then we could trim this and this. So technically that's more of what a sliding window would look like, but it doesn't really matter for what we're doing. I'm going to go ahead and delete these, and then I'll mirror this across, since that one is a little bit more detailed. So I'll mirror from the center here over to there, like that. Okay, so I've established what the windows look like on this wall, and if I switch over into the 3D view, it's very close to what I was drawing in the 3D view, right? And so as you learn to draw and as you learn to be a better architecture student and a better designer and ultimately an architect, you'll be able to keep things like what the elevation looks like in your head while you're drawing the floor plan. And so you learn to manage that at the same time. And it's not a giant mystery when you've done the floor plan to what's the building going to look like, because you've thought about what the elevation was as you were drawing the floor plan. And so I recognize that you guys are all very early in your careers as designers, and you may not have thought what the elevation really looks like just yet. And so it may be a little bit of a surprise to you as it kind of evolves, but at the same time, I think you'll have a pretty good building nonetheless, because you've spent a lot of time on your floor plans. So we will talk through details. If you're running into troubles on your own, just let me know, and we will work through it. So what I have at this point is I have the whole top of the building. If I turn off the guides here for a second, we have what the whole top of the building would look like with its windows, but we don't have anything going at the bottom of the building, and it looks like I also missed this little entry porch over here, so I need to add that as well. So let me come back and turn on the guides, And once again, I'm going to use array on the guides layer. And we'll go there and there. And so this will make even with this line. So let me just draw a guide that goes across there. And I'll switch back to the south elevation layer. And we'll go over and down. I'm going to go down. Let me offset this. Whoops. Didn't mean to hit that. Offset by 1 foot. Right there. And one more line that goes right here. Like that. And I'll do a little trim. There. Okay, so I forgot that little piece. So now that piece is drawn in. So now I have to deal with what happens to this building as it crosses the various topography. And I will admit that this is a more advanced conceptual topic that you may or may not get. If this part doesn't make sense to you, obviously there's a bit of building below what I've drawn. And what we'll need to do is extend it, and you can draw a straight line across somewhere below, and that'll be the ground for you. But I at least want to talk through how you would determine what the actual ground would be on that building elevation, right? Because it's gonna have a little bit of slope to it. So if we look at the floor plan here, what I'm going to do is switch to the guides layer, and I'm going to draw a box, a rectangle, that goes all the way around the outside of my building. And so I'll start at one corner. We'll call it this corner, which is the lowermost right corner. Nothing is below it there. And I need to draw it so that it comes up to this corner, and it lines up with this edge right there and this edge right here. Essentially, this is a bounding box around your object. Okay? So it's a big rectangle, you can see it there, that completely contains my object with no extra space. Does that kind of make sense? Okay? So once I have this, I can start to work through where my building elevations are going to go. So I'm going to create a second layer that's called guides. So let me go to guides, and I'm going to call this guides 2. And I want to do this as a separate layer so that you guys can see with a different color, hopefully orange will show, how I'm doing this. Okay? So let me make guides 2 active, and I'm going to turn back on the topography. There we go. Okay, so I have a bunch of topo lines, and I have where they intersect with my building. Okay? If I'm drawing this elevation, the elevation is on this plane right here. That's where I've cut the elevation. That's where I'm drawing it. So what I need to do is I need to have a construction line or array that extends off this side and extends off this side. Okay? So let me go ahead and type ray, and I'm going to extend along this edge, and I'll extend along this edge. Okay? X line is construction line, and it's going to extend in both directions through point there, and it would extend. Let me show you this just so that you see it. You can do array both sides, but X line is a construction line. And so we'll start from here, and you can see how it goes in both directions. It's essentially array in both directions. So I'll go through that point, enter. Now I have a line that goes off into space in both directions that's even with where I'm looking at my elevation. So remember, an elevation is just a flat view of the facade of the building. And in order to see it, I have to take that elevation at some place. And so we'll take it right there, even with the place on the elevation that's closest to us when we're looking at it. Okay, so now that I've done that, right, I can see where this line crosses over a few of the topography lines. Okay? So I'm going to go ahead and draw an array that starts at each of these points. So we'll go to there, we'll go to here, we'll go to here, and we'll go to here. Now, I told you guys last class what the difference in elevation was at each of these contours. Do you remember?
1 foot.
It's 1 foot. Okay? So if I just started somewhere arbitrarily, right, let's just do another X line. And again, it doesn't matter, just somewhere arbitrarily. Okay? Well, actually, let's make this a little bit easier. right? If I come to this point and I start with a construction line here, right? Each of the contours is at a 1 foot interval. So at each point that I cross these next 3 lines, it's going to be up 1 foot, right? So I'll take this line and I'm going to offset it by 1 foot, and we'll go up 2, 3, like that. And so now I can draw a line that starts at this intersection and moves up at each subsequent point that goes along here. So I'm going to use something called a spline, which is available right here. And I want the spline fit, not the spline CV. I could also type spline. And what this does is it allows me to start at the first point. Oh, let me switch to my south elevation layer here. And to make this clearer, I'm going to turn off the topography for a second. Okay, so I have my points. I'm going to start with my spline. And I'll start at the lowest point, which is here. And the next one's going to be at the intersection there. And at the intersection here. And at the intersection there. And so let me thicken this line up so you can see it a little bit better. Go a little thicker. Do it at 0.9. So this slope now matches up with the topography. Okay, and so like I said, this is a little bit more of an advanced topic in terms of how you calculate the topography. But essentially what I did is I created a plane that was even with where my elevation would be. And then I pulled down the intersection points starting at the lowest point here. And then each one of these is 1 foot up, 1 foot up, 1 foot up. And I end up with this sloping line right there that represents that gentle topography. Now it needs to come up somewhere close to my building, and so I'll go ahead and go to move, right, and I'll move this up somewhere closer to my building. Now this is going to determine how far off the ground my building actually is, right? And so I need to make sure that the highest point, which is in the back here, doesn't get too high for my building, right, for my building floor. So we'll move it up. And we'll say maybe it's about like that or so. And again, that's about the building elevation, where it sits on the ground itself. So now that I have that in, let's turn off all my guides. Off and off. And let me turn off the topography so you don't see that at all. There we go. And now we have the building as it's sitting on the ground. So the ground's here. But I need to extend all of these lines down to where they meet the ground. Right? So I'll take and select these lines. And I can grab these endpoints and just move them down past my line. And I'm doing it, I'm not trying to snap to the line, because if I did that, chances are it would ask me to snap to perpendicular and my line would get off instead of being straight down. So I'm deliberately just going past my topography. And actually, I'm only going to do these 2 outsides because the way that I have this drawn, there should be a floor that goes across right here. Like that. Okay, so now I can take a trim, and we can say trim, and we can trim off all that stuff below building elevation, like that. Now, I also did have some little stairs that were available here and a landing to get in, so I should draw those in as well. So let me make sure I'm on south elevation. I know where my floor was because it's right there. So there would be my floor. And then my stairs, I think we'll call them 6 inches each. I'll say 6 inches. And we'll do, there's a few stairs, like that. The lowest most stair here goes beyond where the hill is shown. So we can go ahead and trim that. Let me trim this, and we'll get rid of. Oh, it's actually all below, so that's fine. We'll just erase it. So I now have this building elevation, the south elevation, generated from the floor plan. Does that kind of make sense how I did that? Right? So now your challenge is to do the next building elevation. So maybe it's this wall, which in my case is actually a very simple elevation. It's a big box. So maybe I won't do that one next. I'll do this one on this side because it's a little bit more complicated. And so this is where your life gets a little bit challenging as you start to learn and pursue your architectural career. For me, it makes no difference whether I draw sideways or upside down. I could draw the elevation completely upside down. It doesn't matter. My brain allows me to do that. And it's just habit, and I've practiced it for so long. For you guys, it may be hard to draw your elevation sideways, such that you'd be looking at the screen this way. Okay? I'm going to show you how to draw it sideways, and then I'll show you the cheater way of doing it. Okay? So I'm going to go back and go to my layer properties here, and instead of the south elevation, we're now going to have the, what would this be, the west elevation. And I'll go back and turn on my guides, and I'll make that active. And I'll start working on this side elevation. So once again, I'll use ray, and I'll go from there. I'll go from there. I'll go from there. And I'll go from there. There. And the last one would be right there. Oh, there's one more. And it would be right there. So I've essentially established where all the corners of this building are. There's a lot of corners that you're going to see on this elevation. So the other thing about these views is there is a relationship between this view here and the view that's going to go right here. And if you guys did 130 and you remember there was that reflecting line, you drew that 45-degree line. Do you vaguely remember that if you took 130? We can use the same principle here to help ourselves with heights. Okay? So what I'm going to do is I'm not going to go from this corner. I'm going to go to that bounding box that I created right here. And I'm going to do my reflecting line from that corner. So I'm going to type ray. And I'm going to go right to that corner. And I don't want a ray that goes straight down. And I don't want a ray that goes straight over. I want one that goes at 45 degrees. And so I could uncheck the restrict to ortho. And we could say, OK, well, I know I want this to be at 45 degrees. Now, it's not actually going to be at 45 degrees. It's going to be at, if we started at, sorry, we're going to draw for a second, right? These pens are awful. If we started right here, this would be 0, right? As we go up, this would be 90, right? Obviously, this would be 45. Make sense? So if we keep going, we get to 180, right? And if we kept going all the way to here, we get to 270. Okay? So what we want is we want the line that's in this direction, which is 180 plus 45, right? Which would be 225, right? So right here, this would be 225 degrees. So remember, when I have the dynamic input on, I can specify a length, but I can also specify a degree. And you see right there, I have the length highlighted right now. But if I press the tab key on the keyboard, it switches to be this value. So I can type in that value 225, which I will, and I'll press the tab key, and now I'm locked in at exactly 45 degrees, which is what I wanted. So we'll click, and I'll press enter. So now that I have that 45-degree line, I can use that to reflect some lines. So we know where this line, right, for that little entry is going to be. So let me go ahead, and I'm going to do a ray. Go back into ortho mode here. That goes off in that direction, and then goes off and reflects around that 45 degrees. Now I can switch into my, what is it, the west elevation there. West elevation, and it looks like I accidentally made my west elevation colored. So hold on, let me change the color of that back to white. Perfect. Thank you. We would have discovered that soon enough. And let me go ahead and draw with my polyline. Oh, let me also create that baseline, the floor line here as well. So let me do a ray off in that direction. Oh, wrong layer, but we'll change them. Like this and this, and those should be on the guide layer. OK, so now that I'm here, I can come back to my polyline, and I'm going to draw this front little wall that's right there. And it's going to go from here, up, over, and back down. And that then represents this wall at that height. Okay? So we'll continue, and I'll go to my guides layer again, and I'll type ray, and we'll go to this next block. And then I'll go across that way again, switch to my west elevation, And that's going to be this one. So we'll start right there. We'll go up. We'll go over. It ends to here. So we'll go to there. And we'll go back down to there. Okay? So I have that one. The next wall is right here. It happens to be at the same height because this whole building is the same height. So we'll go ahead and continue to there and then down to there. Okay? So I'm looking at it kind of sideways and I'm pulling those lines across. The next one that I'm going to see is this big tall piece. So we'll switch to my guides layer, and I'll do a ray from this piece straight over, and we'll reflect it up this direction. And now it's going to go from right there up to here. Oops, sorry, I had to switch my layers. There to there. We're going to come across all the way to there and back down to there. So if I were to turn my guides off here, right, we can see that I'm starting to see that elevation on one side. Okay, and it takes practice to be able to draw it this way, but it saves you a little bit of work as you're doing it. If you're struggling to visualize this, I'm going to turn everything back on for just a second. Instead of drawing it sideways, I could take everything. So I can press Control-A to select everything, and I could rotate the whole thing from this corner, right, at 90 degrees. And when I do that, everything changed. Oops, sorry. I hit Escape. My bad. So we'll go there. We'll go 90. Enter. Oh, looks like this was on a locked layer, so it didn't rotate. But you get the idea, right? Or at least I didn't select it. Let me try it one more time. All right. Well, never mind. So all right. Apparently, I managed to delete my whole thing. Such is life, right? All right. Let's try that one more time. Rotate from right there, 90. There it is. And it looks like I lost a little bit. So let me come back and I'll do a few new polylines. Oh, I need a few rays first. But this may help you more easily visualize what's happening. Usually dropping it straight down, it makes it easier. The key is that as you rotate, you want to end up back with north straight up, right? So you don't get lost. So we'll continue this down. The reflecting line still works. We'll go across like that. I'll continue this one down to there. This one will go across. And now I can use my polyline, and we'll go up to that point. Oops, need to be on my west elevation layer. To there, to there, there, to there. This is going to go from here to there, there. This is going to go there to there. Okay, so I now have where I was. I still have to create the topography, so I have to work through that piece, which I'll do in just a second. And there's a few little details like the way that this slopes on the front. I'm going to see a little bit of that front. It's go ahead and switch to the 3D view for just a second here. That wall right there is not even with this wall, so it has an angled front. If we looked at it in the top, see that? So I would need to draw that in the side elevation. If I switched into my right view, and let me go into my artistic here. Oops, wrong view. Let me switch to the left. There we go. There's that piece that I was telling you about that kicks over. Okay, so it is there, and then I could add in, any other little pieces or any little clear stories or whatever that were part of this particular model as well. So I don't want you to have to sit and watch me draw the whole elevation, but you get the idea of how I rotated and then fold it or pulled it down. The one last thing that I do want to do is I want to show you that topography thing one more time so that you can see the reference there. Okay? So I'm going to go into my Guides 2 layer. We'll turn that back on. I didn't rotate the Guides 2, so let me just go ahead and delete the guides here. Rotate. There you go. Oops. That was my mistake. I forgot to rotate those. Okay, so now that those are back, let me go ahead and turn on the topography. And so once again, right, if I look at this bounding box, right, I want to extend a construction line in both directions. So I'll say X line, which is just a ray that goes in 2 directions. And this time, I want it to go through this point. So now I have a line that's going in this direction. Actually, you know what? Let me make a Guides 3 layer so you can see the difference in the colors, because it starts to get too confusing. So let me come back here. We'll create a Guides 3. And let me change the color of Guides 3. We'll make it active. And let me make this the Guides 3 layer. Let's get rid of this piece. Okay, so I now have it's this kind of light blue color. Okay, so I have that line going off in either direction, and I want to see where it crosses certain contour intervals. Okay, so I'm going to go off in this direction and do a ray where it crosses this point right there, where it crosses this one, should be right here, where it crosses this one, and where it crosses, oh, you know what? I don't think the topo's rotated. I think I might have had them locked. No, they're unlocked. Okay, let me rotate those. Hold on. Sorry about that. I was wondering why these things didn't line up correctly. We're going to rotate around that point right there, 90. There we go. That's better. So make sure you rotate everything so you don't get lost. And so now I have those rotated, and we see where they corresponded last time. There, 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 and right there. I'm going to do the same thing on this to the same elevation contours. Okay? So let me delete these, and we'll do them again. Okay. So I need a ray that's going to happen right here. 1. I need one that's going to happen right here. There's 2. I need one that's going to happen right there. That's 3. Oops. And I need one that's going to happen right there, and that's 4. So once again, it's helpful to come down here somewhere in space, and we'll set up that first line. Oops, let me get rid of this. Okay, there's that first line. Let me offset it by 1 foot. So we'll say offset, and my distance is going to be 1 foot. And we're going to go 1, 2, 3, like that. Now, in this view, we're going up that direction. So my first one is going to be right here. So I'm going to use my elevation, west elevation, and I'm going to use a spline, which is again hidden right there. We'll start at this first point. We'll go to the second point. We'll go to the third point, and we'll go to the last point. And then let me take this and thicken it up so that you guys can see it a little bit better. There it is. Okay, so now this line is the elevation line on this side of my building. Now, it does matter, however, where this elevation falls. And I have to line it up and wrap it around the same 45-degree line that I did before. So I need to find out on the edge or corner of the building right there right, and pull that line around so that my topo ends up in the same place in elevation. So I'll come up to this view right here, right to the corner of my building, right there, and I'll do a ray from right there, where my topo crosses, down to my 45-degree line. There it is. Oh, sorry, I should have been on my guides layer. And I'll do one more ray that goes from right here over that way. And it's now going to correspond, once again, to this corner as this comes down right and intersects that point right there. So I need to make sure that this piece of topography, if I move it from right there, ends up right there, like that. Okay? So now I know that this line corresponds exactly with where this piece of topography is. Okay? Notice that this corner doesn't necessarily match, and that's okay. It should match up at this corner because that's the corner of the building that we're going from. Okay? So we just want to make sure that we reference that, and we end up with the topo line. I could trim these off so that they're not so long. I just left them long so that we have an understanding of where they end up in space and how I generated them. Okay? So let me turn off all of my guides. I know it starts to get very confusing with the number of guides. Go back to west elevation. And that's why I recommend multiple guides layers so that you can choose to turn them on and turn them off. Turn off the topography. And now we can start to see there's one elevation, and here's my next elevation. So I'll do the same thing, where I'll extend all of these below. Like that. And then I can trim all of these off like that, and I end up with that side of the building. Okay? So then I can turn everything on, and I can rotate the whole thing again, or I could draw upside down. It's again dependent on what feels comfortable for you. My guess is that a lot of you will rotate the building through. Just make sure that you rotate it back, or get it back so that north is straight up. Okay? Are there any questions? No? So the goal today is to get your elevations out. When you're done, you're going to do the same strategy of printing to a JPEG. So we'll go down to the print to web JPEG, use the custom paper size, and we'll put a window around the whole thing. And you'll end up with something like this that has your building, but then has your, hopefully, 4 elevations. Right? We're shooting for 4 elevations when we get to the final. So, or not the final, sorry, the assignment 105. So we'll ultimately be working there, but you're going to get as far as you can today with elevations. It may only be 1. All right?